I remember that in fifth grade, my class went on a field trip to this nature park. I don't recall exactly which park it was, but it was probably like 20 minutes from my school. There was a walking path, but it wasn't really that long, and the park was not for hiking. It was more for looking at the waterfall and river that was there. There were different levels of elevation and a lot of overlook places and stuff. So when we got there, I remember that we went to the building and somebody talked to us for a while. It was just my class of roughly about 30 kids and our teacher. We then walked around to the different places on some of the trails. Then, after that, we had some time to walk around on our own and look at some spots. There was a kid that I was sort of friends with that I was kind of hanging out with. Well, while we were there wasn't really anybody else in the park other than our class. I did notice a few random people here and there, but not many. So after walking around and stuff and being there for probably an hour, I remember that I went off with my friend. We were just going to different places to see the views. I think we would be leaving to go back to the school in about 30 minutes or so. It was then when we were walking around that I saw this other kid around our age. However, he was not in our class. The kid kind of walked near my friend and I, but didn't say anything. I didn't really know anything about him, but I assumed that he was maybe there with his parents or something. My friend and I eventually walked off, and I remember that the kid sort of followed us. He didn't walk real close, but he sort of trailed us a ways back. We walked around for a good 20 minutes, and every place that we went, the kid seemed to be a little ways behind us. It was kind of odd. We mostly just ignored him, though. Eventually, it was time for us to meet back up with the rest of the class. So we went back over, and the teacher took attendance near the bus in the parking lot. Then we all started to get on the bus. It was at this time when I noticed the kid again. He was walking over from the other end of the parking lot. To my surprise, the kid walked right up behind me. I was one of the last kids to get in line on the bus, and my teacher, I think, was talking to another student a ways away. The kid blended right in and got on the bus with me. I was very confused, and I was really close to turning around and asking him who he was, but I didn't. So this kid then got onto the bus and proceeded to sit in the farthest seat in the back. I was shocked, and I'm 100% certain that he was not in my class. He didn't talk to anyone, and just got into his seat on the bus and didn't say anything. I went to a different seat, and we then went back to the school. After arriving back, everybody got off the bus. I purposely looked around to try to find the kid after getting off. When I did, I saw him exit the bus and then walk behind it away from the class. The rest of us had to go inside the school, and once in, the teacher took attendance again. The kid was obviously gone, and I was still trying to figure out why he rode on our bus. I went on with the school day and continued with my classes. Then after school, I got out and I left. This was probably just like an hour after we got back from the field trip. During this time, I would ride another bus home. When I left the school to catch my bus, I saw the kid again. He was standing around by a tree outside the school, but it looked like he was hiding behind it. I honestly don't know what he was doing. We left after that. I never saw him again. To this day, that still puzzles me. When I was in school, we took several field trips to the zoo. One in particular was when I was about 8 years old. My entire class went, and I always liked all kinds of field trips. The zoo was one of my favorites, though. I don't remember everything because it was a really long time ago, but I know that after getting to the zoo, we were guided around by our teacher and someone who worked for the zoo. There were quite a few of us kids then. After looking at some animals and stuff, at one point, we were just kind of standing around. I'm not really sure what was going on, but we were on the walkways between several exhibits. The zoo was very large, and I remember that I was standing sort of in the back of everybody. I was just hanging out, and this woman randomly approached me. She had come from the walkway to my right. There was a bit of an intersection in the paths just behind me. I did not know who she was, but she looked at me as if she knew who I was. The woman then said my name. I was confused, and my first thought was that maybe she was a friend of my mother's. She then asked if she could show me something. Then she told me to follow her and started to walk off. I hesitated because I knew that I was supposed to stick with my class and I didn't want to get in trouble. And I'm ashamed to say it, but that's probably the only reason that I didn't immediately go with her. I wasn't really suspicious, even though she was a stranger. But just then, I remember that the class started moving and all the other students were starting to walk forward. At that point, the woman waved me back over to the class and said, "Never mind." So I went with the class and continued. We looked at several more exhibits of the zoo and saw a bunch more animals. We were in one of the buildings the next time I saw the woman again. I was just looking at, I believe, the monkeys, and the woman approached me. She told me that when we got out of the building, I was supposed to go with her. I was confused, but I just said okay. Then the woman walked off. When we left the building, the woman seemed to almost be waiting for me. My teacher and the tour guide were busy wrangling all the other kids along, and must have not really noticed the woman. As we walked out of the building, the lady asked me to follow her again. This time, I started to. I walked out of the area where the rest of my class was. We started to go down a different path. But at that point, I guess my teacher happened to see it. She yelled my name and I looked back. When I did, the woman I remember told me to quickly go with her, but my teacher started approaching. I just stood where I was, confused. Then the woman just walked away, and I stayed where I was. The teacher came over, and all the kids were staring at me. By the time the teacher got to me, the woman was long gone. And then I just remember the teacher asking me questions about her and telling me that she was not supposed to be there. My parents ended up getting called, and my mom had to come and pick me up. That's really all that I remember. It's crazy to think that it really happened. I'm honestly not sure who the woman was and how she knew my name. I don't recall ever seeing her another time. I'm really glad that the teacher noticed, or who knows what would have happened. I was in high school. During my sophomore year, we took a field trip to a local museum. It was a common place for local people to go. It was a history museum. I'd been there once before, but not with school. The museum was fairly large and had a lot of different rooms and areas. So when we got there, I remember that it was not my entire school or grade, but just my history class. So there was like 20-something of us, and we did not by any means rent out the museum or anything. So some regular visitors were there as well, but it was not too busy with it being a weekday morning. The field trip was going to last for several hours though. For like 15 minutes, someone who worked there came out and talked to us. Then we could sort of go in the museum at our own pace. My friend in this class was Anna, who I had known since elementary school. Anna and I walked from room to room, and before long, most of the kids were pretty spread out. We got into this one room at one point. It was a little darker with not as much light. Anna and I were kind of in the corner, and this man came into the room. He walked slowly towards us, but stopped a ways away. I then noticed that he kind of seemed to be looking at us, but I didn't think much of it. The guy walked closer to us, and then went into this prohibited area of the exhibit. He did not appear to be an employee. The employees would all wear the same shirts, and this guy was not wearing one. The guy went into this area that I'm guessing was for employees only, and then we could no longer see him. Anna and I both found it strange. We moved on and continued into another area. I remember that we didn't see the guy again for a while. Later on, we had lunch there, and there was the option to go outside where there were some tables. Not very many people went out because there were more tables inside. However, Anna and I, as well as maybe 3 or 4 other kids, were eating outside. We were talking and just sitting there when I noticed the man again. He was standing outside just randomly. There was a little grassy area with some trees and stuff. The man stood near a tree and looked over at us. Something about the guy just gave me the creeps. I just ignored him though, and kept talking to Anna. Sometime later though, I looked up, and he was still looking in our direction. I didn't know what the man was doing exactly. I told Anna about seeing him, because she was sitting with her back to the guy and couldn't see him. After a little while, I really could not believe that he was still staring. So at that point, we decided to go back inside of the building. We stayed in there for the rest of the time, and shortly after, it was time to leave. We all went down to the parking lot out front to board the bus. When we did, I saw the man standing in the parking lot. He wasn't really by any particular car. It sort of looked like he was almost just wandering around. After getting onto the bus, Anna and I were sitting next to each other, and we looked out of the window. We saw the man creepily smiling and waving at us. It was very strange. He basically continued that until we left and drove off. Luckily, we never saw him after that. A few years ago, back when I was in high school, several classes from my school went on a field trip. We were going to a play that was being put on at a theater in the nearby city. It was a pretty large and nice theater and well known in the community. So we left school early in the morning and rode the bus down there. It took like 30 minutes, and by the time the ride was over, I really had to pee. So when we got to the theater, the classes went into the auditorium, but I went to use the restroom. It took me a minute to find it, but I was able to. The restroom was a little bit farther down in the hallway, though. I was not inside for long, and after I left, I walked to the auditorium to be seated. But when I got there, it looked like everybody had already sat down. Apparently, there was not assigned seating, so I just found the nearest open area, which was in the back. I ended up not sitting by anybody that I knew at all, and I was on an end seat of the right before last row. So after that, the play started. The lights turned down, and everybody focused their attention to the stage. I followed along for the first 15 minutes or so, but then I remembered that there was suddenly a tap on my shoulder. I looked over to my left, and there was some guy standing there in the aisle. I didn't know him, but he whispered to me that he had to see me. I assumed that he worked there or something for a moment. I didn't know why I was being asked to leave, but I got up and I went with the guy. After walking out of the auditorium, he told me to follow him. We went down the hallway, and then he took a left into another nearby hallway. Both hallways were mostly completely empty because the show was going on. When we got to the second hallway, though, I saw these two other guys there, and they told me to follow them. I had no idea who any of them were. They were all dressed pretty well, not in suits or anything, but somewhat professional. I asked why, but they didn't answer me. By now, I had gone from feeling confused to suspicious and also scared. We kept going down the hallway, and then I saw an exit door. We were heading towards it. I stopped and I said that I could not leave because I was in class. The men didn't say anything. One of them sort of grabbed my arm, though. When he did this, I freaked out. I yelled for them to stop, and I then turned and sprinted in the opposite direction. I ran all the way back to the original hallway. When I was there, I saw an employee of the theater and approached him. I tried explaining what happened, and the guy seemed really confused. I asked if any of the men like that worked at the theater, and he said no. I walked back over with him to the hallway they went down, but the men were no longer in sight. The employee said he would report it to security, and I could go back to my class if I wanted. So I went back to the play and finished watching it. After that, I never really heard anything more about the situation. I still don't know what exactly happened. I'm really glad that I got away from those guys, though. Back when I was in high school, I was in a class where we took a field trip to a local park. The park that it was at was very large and had tons of trails on it. We were going to take a hike for class, and then we were going to have a sort of picnic. So I remember we met in the classroom, and then we walked out to a bus and boarded it. We took the 10-minute or so drive to the park, and then got off the bus. Our teacher led us on the hike, and we all followed him. The class was about average size, but I really didn't have any good friends in it. I walked with everybody else down the different trails, and the entire hike lasted for probably 45 minutes. Towards the end of it, though, I remember we were walking through this area with really thick woods on both sides. The trail was also somewhat narrow. When we were walking on this part, I saw some of my classmates looking over to the left. I thought maybe they saw an animal, but I heard somebody say that there was a man in the woods. A few of us stopped and looked. When I did, though, I didn't see anything at all. I did hear some noises in the woods, and I heard a kid say something like, "There he goes." I kept looking, but never saw the person. A bunch of us were watching for him, but the people at the front, like the teacher, didn't seem to notice. A few more moments of looking, and we finally continued on with the group. The rest of the hike lasted for maybe 5 more minutes or so. Then we left the woods and went over to the area in the park with some open grass and picnic tables. This was back by the bus, as well as near where we had started. The path basically did a really long loop. So the teacher went and got the food, and he was setting things up. The rest of us were just hanging out in the grassy area and talking. I got kind of bored and didn't really have anybody to talk to. I decided to just walk a little ways back into the woods on the path. At first, I went there just because I was bored. Then, after walking a little ways on the path, I remembered the kids seeing a man in the woods. I went farther to see if I could see anything. After walking on the path for a little while longer, I actually heard a noise a ways inside of the woods. I stopped and looked. It was up ahead of me and to the right of the path. As I looked around, soon the noises got louder. Then a man actually emerged from the woods onto the path. He was this really dirty-looking guy. He stared right at me as I stood there. I did not say anything. I was just kind of shocked to see him. Then the man suddenly just started sprinting at me. I turned and took off running back towards my class. The man continued chasing me though. I was running as fast as I could, but the man seemed like he was gaining on me. After running for a little while though, he finally slowed down. I feel like he could have caught up with me if he kept chasing. But not long after, I finally reached the end of the woods again. I rejoined my class, and I found a kid and told him about the man chasing me. We both then went back down the path a ways, but didn't see the guy. I didn't want to go any farther, and we went back. After that, I didn't go back into the woods. I didn't see the guy for the rest of the field trip. I'm not sure what he was doing in the woods or why he chased me. I'm really creeped out by it though.